Hey there, dirt bike people. I'm Chuck from TrueTech, and today I am going to be starting to build the ultimate off-road enduro weapon. This is a 2025 300 XCW. I don't know what edition it is. It's got a fan on it. That's the important part. This customer lives way up north, so he wants me to build this thing as reliably as possible so that he can just spend his time in the woods. This guy works a lot, so he doesn't want to have to do a whole lot of maintenance or upgrades or changes. He likes riding technical hard enduro stuff. He's not one of those guys that likes to go very fast. He wants the bike protected and practical. He's also got a bit of a short inseam, so I'm going to spring the bike and lower it for his weight. So I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to be doing a lot of mods on this bike, so I'll jump through and I'll show you the important parts, why I'm doing the mods that I'm doing, and a bunch of the little tidbits that most people tend to miss when they're setting up a bike. So I'm getting into it here now. Beautiful day. First day this spring where I'm able to work with the door open. Got the shock apart here. I'm going to make a spacer. That's the distance that I need there. I made little marks. Another thing that I'm going to do while I have this apart, because this guy wants ultimate reliability, is I'm going to put a Racetech seal into this seal head because the WP seals are notorious for leaking prematurely. You'll get hundreds of hours out of the Racetech seal, probably not out of the WP seal. Got my spacer made up. That's just going to sit there. It doesn't let the shock top out all the way. That's how the lowering happens. Now we can go back together. We're all put back together. If you're interested in learning way more about suspension and what I just did and a lot more, I have a suspension course on my TrueTech community, link in the description. Now, before I put the shock in, I went ahead and greased the swing arm bearings. This is a PDS shock, so I don't need to do the linkage. If you want to see a full walkthrough on how to grease swing arms with and without linkage, click the link up there or the link in the description. While I'm servicing the rear end, this is something that I always do. I'm going to take these out and put some anti-seize on them. This doesn't have to be done very often, but if you've ever had one of these bolts seize in the swing arm, you know why I do it. Really, the root of the problem is that this bolt extends past the threads into the swing arms, so there's a good portion of the bolt that's in the air, and moisture gets into here and it rusts the end of the bolt, and then when you try to pull that bolt out, the rust catches on the threads and it balls up, and usually this will break off before it'll come out. Then it requires machining. I'm working on taking these forks off, and this pipe is just staring me in the face. We got to talk about that for a second. I talked with the customer about the options for protecting the pipe, and we ultimately went with no protection. And we did that for a very specific reason. As far as I'm concerned, there is one option for pipe protection, and that is one of those big dirt shovels that covers under the whole frame and the pipe. One of those big, huge things that catches everything in it. That is the only option that is going to actually protect the pipe. The pros and cons, obviously it's heavy, it collects half the trail, you bring it home with you, it gets stuck in ruts, it's very difficult to get on and off if you want to do maintenance. And I know a bunch of you were saying, well, put a carbon fiber pipe guard. No, a carbon fiber pipe guard is not actually a pipe guard, it is a pipe destroyer and a cylinder destroyer. The only place where I can see a carbon fiber pipe guard being practical is if you're racing moto. What you got to ask yourself is if you want to protect the pipe from little dings or if you want to protect it from getting bent and twisted. So those carbon fiber guards are great for protecting against small dings, but when the bike takes a big hit right here or right here, for example, the pipe tends to bend instead of just cave in a little bit. And spots that get caved in, they're easy to blow out, but a pipe that's all bent and twisted, it's pretty much junk. It's very difficult to fix a pipe that's been all twisted. In worst case scenario, the pipe gets all bent, it puts a bunch of pressure on that flange, and then you not only have to replace the pipe, but the exhaust flange as well. I have no patience for carbon fiber pipe guards. So for me, it's now Sunday, and I've got the rear end basically finished, what I did yesterday, and now I'm going to lower the forks and we'll see how far we get. I got Supercross on, watching a muddy race, I love those, and doing suspension, not a bad way to spend a Sunday. Okay, I got one of these forks apart, I've got these spacers machined up, 2-inch spacer. Basically, we're just gonna drop that on there, and it's not gonna allow the fork to extend fully. That's inside the inner cartridge. Again, if you guys want way more details on this stuff, you can join the TrueTech community, check out my suspension course. It's very detailed concepts and procedures. Since the fork can't extend all the way, obviously we're gonna need to change the springs. These springs are heavier for the rider's weight anyway. So these springs are about 2 inches shorter. Next, we'll have to set up the preload and make sure it's all correct. I love setting up the preload on these new WP closed chambers. Got a couple extra shims on there. Just push that down, put in the clip, and now that can go right back in. The other side is exactly the same, so I won't bore you with that. Now, before we put the forks back on, we're gonna quickly grease the steering bearings because it's easy to do while we're here. So here we are, ready to grease that. I don't take it all the way off. See, I got this little strap hanging it there, so I just need to get at that. You can see there's not much grease on there. I'm definitely going to add a bunch. What I like to do is add a bunch up top so that over time the grease will gradually work its way down into the bearing just with gravity. Up here, I'm going to add a little bit. Now, I don't know if you guys can see. I'll try. Yeah, you can see there is no hole in there for a steering stem lock, so there is absolutely no way that fuel can get into those bearings, so I'm not going to worry about that at all. Not that it really matters on this one because this fuel line vent goes down there. Just goop a whole bunch more grease right on in there. Now here is where things are going to start to get a little bit complicated. Got the forks back on, got the triple clamps all buttoned up. I want to put the front wheel down so that I can drop the stand, so I can take the skid plate off so that I can drain the coolant. Before I do that, I got to swap out the tube. These cute little stock tubes are getting demoted to spares, and we're going with some heavy duty 3mm tubes. I talked with this rider about what would be the best solution for him. He thought maybe mousses, but after we talked it over, he thought, no mousses, we're gonna go with heavy duty tubes. If you wanna see why he chose heavy duty tubes, I'll put a link up here. I got a video specifically about that. Another thing that's gonna happen in here, this bike comes stock with a fan, and what I'm gonna do is put in an override switch as well as a battery voltage readout, and I'm gonna delete the oil injection system. So if the fan is going for a long time and it's starting to kill the battery, the rider is going to be able to look at the voltage readout up here, and he's going to know, okay, I better stop the fan, and he's going to hit the override switch. I have that on my personal bike, and I've used it a few times. Of course, in order to do that, it's necessary to run Evans. Evans is not as efficient at normal operating temperature, but when things get really toasty, it doesn't boil, and it keeps moving heat long after the boiling point of regular coolant. So this isn't a no-brainer for every rider, but in this case, it's going to be a good holistic solution for this rider. Lots of things going on here before I get to put the tank back on. I'm also going to go with a different head and a map as well. Oh, and I almost forgot about the Rad Guard that we're going to do. In my opinion, the Emperor one-piece radiator guard for the KTMs is the only option. The problem with both the TPIs and the TBIs is that if the rad gets pushed backwards at all, which can very easily happen, this rad hose here gets pinched against this cover, and on the TPIs it's against the power valve cover right on the motor, and then you get a coolant leak. Well, you can double wrap this or protect it in all kinds of different ways, but if the rad gets pushed back hard enough, it will pop it even if there's a double layer there. And a big part of that problem is because the rad hose spigot here, this aluminum piece, is quite sharp on the inside there. The proper way to fix it is to put a one-piece rad guard on there just to eliminate the possibility of the rad getting pushed back. If you can bend this rad guard so badly that the rad gets pushed back, you got other problems. This thing is 1/4" aluminum, welded all the way around. It has bottom and side protection. The manufacturing quality is awesome, top of the line. Like I said, in my opinion, this is the only option. Funny story here about this bike, just came in today. I did some setup on this bike when it was new, and we talked about doing a rad guard. Rider decided not to, and wouldn't you know it. Now, no shade on this rider at all. Everybody's got to make the decisions that make the most sense for them. Normally, this guy uses Bulletproof Designs rad guards. Now, the problem that I have with those is that they have zero side protection. And in this case, you can see the sharp rock hit right here and just bent that rad in. Now, this rad's going to be okay, but I do have a rad guard coming to prevent this problem from happening again. So I'm going to get this tube changed out. I'm also going to put a bunch of lube inside there to prevent pinch flats for this rider. For that lube, I'm just going to use this SRT tire mounting paste. Well, they call it Mousse lube. It's the same thing. This stuff has pros and cons. It's water-based, so it will wash out eventually, but this is what I use for my mousses. It doesn't break down the rubber, and it stays gooey in there for a long time. So that's going to be a good option for this. I'm literally just going to put my glove on. It's hard to film while I do that, so I'm just going to take a gob of this. I'm not even going to take the tire off. I'm just going to put it in there and rub it along the inside, and it'll disperse itself as the rider rides. So I'm making some progress here. The customer wanted me to replace this T-piece with a silicone one. I didn't think of it earlier, but the thermostat is molded into here, and I don't see an option anywhere for a T-piece that also accommodates a thermostat. Now, I know a lot of people are like, just delete the thermostat. I am absolutely not deleting this thermostat unless the customer says, yes, I want it. It's absolutely silly to run without a thermostat on a fuel-injected bike, especially up here in Canada where a lot of our riding is, you know, around the freezing point. I'm actually running a slightly warmer thermostat insert on my personal bike, and I have two maps, and one of them is for extremely cold temperatures. It gives it a little bit more fuel. I have a temp probe in my rads and one in my thermostat so that I can see the difference between the rads and what the engine is doing. And when I'm riding in the cold, especially on kind of transit sections on logging roads or something, the rads are freezing cold, the engine stays warm. The engine temperature does even drop a bit, so running without a thermostat, it's just silly. I am going to put that back in because I don't have a better option. Got this Rad Guard basically installed. It's really close. I'm just making some small adjustments here. This little piece wraps around the frame here, so you gotta be careful. I've seen that happen before. This is the starter wire. You gotta make sure that that doesn't get squished. Same with the skid plate here. I've also got an Emperor skid plate, and you gotta remove these zip ties here so you don't squish that. That's all buttoned up there, nice and solid. You can't tell me that there is a better Rad Guard available than that. Look at the coverage on that thing. Basically, the rads are untouchable. Actually, I will put a link in the description if you want to buy one. Emperor doesn't help me out in any way. I'm just a regular dealer. I sell them because I love the products. Quick little thing while I'm here. The rider did want a larger brake tip. I happen to have this Enduro Engineering one in stock. I'm not a huge fan of these because the stock one folds and it's really flexible metal. I've bent mine many times and then I bend it back. Last year I did crunch it totally. These are 35 bucks. I don't find that unreasonable, but the customer did want a bigger one, and these are nice because you can adjust them forward and back. You can use the stock one off of the bigger 4-strokes, and it's about the same size and it does fold, but you can't adjust the position of it. So those adjustable holes there are nice on this one. This one's also very grippy. Now another nice little touch with this Emperor Rad Guard, you can see that this fender is 1/8 of an inch away from that Rad Guard. Well, if you look up in there, Steve provides a couple of washers because if he didn't, then the fender would be touching the Rad Guard right in the middle there. Now I remember when the TPIs came out, I was talking with Steve about the rigidity of aluminum skid plates and Rad Guards, how some people said that they did not like that rigidity that it brought. Well, when Steve was doing his R&D for his new products for the new bikes, he took the springs out of the forks and collapsed the wheel all the way up to see how far it would go, and the front wheel, he said, was 1/8 of an inch away from the pipe. So if there was any significant frame flex, the tire would actually hit the pipe, and very similar with the front fender here. So Steve is super thorough with his R&D, and it goes to show in his products. All right, that's enough about Emperor. I like Emperor, okay? And there's a lot of good reasons. Another quick little thing here. So here we have the override switch. So it's just on off, very simple. And he'll probably never use it, but if his battery voltage does go down, he can shut that off, and the Evans that I'm gonna put in here will save him. All right. Skip ahead another day, got some more things done. I've removed these flags. I don't have the correct bolts, but I'm gonna try and go to town and wrangle some PDI kits out of the local dealers. I also don't have these rubber pieces. It drives me nuts. It's so common for the dealers not to give the PDI kits to the customer. I've installed these Emperor handguard mounts. This is the ticket to get your handguards to not rotate up or down. When they rotate up or down, the risk is that they break your hydraulic lines, and that's very annoying. I don't mind using the threaded inserts, but the threaded inserts are to keep the bar from popping out, not to keep it from rotating. Next, I did a voltmeter here. It's just connected directly to the battery, and that's so that while the rider is riding, and if the fan is turning on, or maybe he's got his headlight on, whatever the case, he can monitor his battery voltage. I've also installed this skid plate. This is my favorite skid plate. Customer also decided to go with this one. I like it because it's small, compact, but it does an excellent job of protecting the frame underneath. Also with these wings on both sides, it's easy to remove. It's easy to pressure wash in there. I've seen lots of bikes with plastic skid plates where the frame rails are all dented and squished in. I'm not against plastic skid plates, but I think that's for kind of cross-country racing where you're not smashing the bottom of your bike on rocks all the time. Now, the big news today is that I have not found an oil pump delete kit that also includes a delete dongle for the oil level sensor. So what I've done here is I've pinned this. So this is positive, this one over here was negative, this is the signal wire, I've verified that. Across these two, I get just over 3 volts. So what I want to do is put a resistor in there to trick the ECU into thinking that the level sensor is still attached, and that way the low oil light won't be on constantly. Now this made me scratch my head a bunch, but I ended up with a 12 ohm resistor there, and this is a 5 volt LED, so that tells me that this circuit is functioning the way that it should. And I'm going to put that LED on the bike, and I expect it will work. All right, happy Saturday, people. It's actually been a couple of weeks, and I've just been waiting for parts and stuff to come in. I've assembled all the rest of the parts I need to finish this, except for this little plug here. But judging by the time that it is taking to get here, I'd say it's probably coming from China. Although, some stuff gets here faster from China than from Washington. Anyway, on to the most important thing that you can do to your KTM two-stroke engine. Start with the second best thing you can do to the engine. That's put a different head on it. And it is a far second to putting a TSP map in it. I did one of these ERMs yesterday. I installed it on a TBI, and just like with the TPIs, it is so amazing. If you're used to hearing your bike and then you put a TSP map in it, the bike immediately sounds totally different. You can tell before you even rev up the bike. So this TSP head is a very nice addition to the TSP ERM or the maps. So let's just have a look at these here. They look quite similar, but the dome on the stock one is a little bit more angled, and the dome on the TSP one has a little bit of a steeper wall. So I'm not going to go through the whole install. It's pretty simple. This goes here. However, I will make a note. The most important part of doing this install, really the critical part, is making sure that you check the squish. If you don't check the squish, you run the risk of having the squish be too tight, and then you'll make too much compression and you'll get detonation all around the edges of the cylinder. Don't do it. There's an excellent video on how to check squish. I'll link it here. That's right from Dave himself. So I'm going to go ahead and install this head, and then I'll bring you in while I'm setting up the ERM. Now, before I put this all back together, I'm going to be putting Evans waterless coolant in it. I know that that's a buzzword. Here's the deal. Ethylene glycol / H2O, which is just regular coolant, and then Evans, which is just ethylene glycol with some additives to prevent corrosion and electrolysis. So the pros with regular coolant is that they have a better heat transfer rate, significantly better than Evans. Regular coolant will keep your bike cooler than Evans as long as the coolant is not boiling. The problem with enduro bikes is that it's very, very common for bikes to boil over, and as soon as you have a boil over situation, your engine temperature skyrockets. At that point, you have lost control and you have to stop. When coolant is boiling, it's no longer able to take the heat from the engine and take it on into the coolant. Because Evans stays liquid at a much higher temperature, even though it's not transferring heat as efficiently, it's still gonna keep moving the heat from the engine into the coolant, and then from the coolant into the rads and into the atmosphere. It keeps it going. So if you're not somebody who is boiling their bike over regularly, Evans doesn't really make sense. However, this is clearly a hard enduro bike, and it will definitely get boiled over if we don't manage it. Got the tank back on, Evans is filled up, and I also installed the bark busters. Now, regardless of whether you're a flag guy or a full wrap guy, there are some good reasons why I like to use these. And the MK07s are really the key, because if you're running the typical handguard mounts that just go around the bar, the handguard is free to move up and down. If the handguard is free to go up and down, when you crash, there's a good chance that you will snap off either your front brake line or your clutch line. Ask me how I know. The point of these is to keep your handguards mounted securely. These things do not move unless they bend, and usually it's these that bend before these super rigid bark busters do. Now, I've ridden plenty of examples back and forth between flags and bark busters. I cannot tell the difference in bar flex. I've tried to perceive it. Not for me. In my opinion, this is what offers the most protection to your handlebars, your hands, and your controls. And no, I'm not worried about my hands going down into there. The chances of that are way, way less than crushing my fingers if I don't have good wraparound guards. I'm not against flags at all, but I do prefer these. All right, here's the ERM. I've got this thing registered. I've got the TSP map on here. Now, up here, there's that little plug. This is the little cover that's normally on it. Take it off, don't lose it. Now the ERM just plugs in with this, but I need two hands to do it. Hold up. We're plugged in. We're going to pair it with the bike. Successfully paired. Now we're going to go to tune. So the TSP tune is in there. Now I'm going to go here. Absolute throttle is 0.6. Okay, so I think we're going to have an issue with that. What I'm going to do now is recalibrate the TPS. And this is a brand new bike. It has 0 hours on it. So all I did there was I wound it all the way out and then set it to 0.4. That's like the base setting. And then I set it to 0.53, which is the idle setting. And now what I'm going to do is press the yellow high idle knob, this one, and it should go up to 0.63 roughly. So now I'm going to rotate it out to roughly 0.1 of a volt higher than the idle setting. Good to go. Now I forget how to do the throttle recalibration, so I'm just watching the YouTube video. So that's the full setup of the TBI. Oftentimes the TPS is off, so it's handy to be able to do this with the ERM. You can do it by pinning the TPS. It's a lot more difficult. The ERM makes it super easy. This bike is set up, ready to go. I'm going to start it up. Man, they make this high idle difficult to get to. Oh, just like that. All right, now one more thing here. I was just checking and I was getting the oil light come on and I was getting a diagnostic code saying that the oil level sensor was malfunctioning. So the resistor that I had in here originally was not working. So I just changed it out. This is a 1 milliohm resistor and that turned the light off. All right, so that is working. I got the seat on, everything is functional. I gotta go take it out for a test ride yet, but the last thing I have to do while it's on the bench is to put a heavy duty tube in the rear and also install this 47 tooth rear sprocket. Nothing special here. I'm just gonna, just like with the front, I'm gonna take this Mousse lube / tire paste. I'm just gonna take a big dollop of it like this in my hand and I am going to put it inside of the tire. I'm just gonna stuff it in there and just kind of work it around like this. Yeehaw, there we go. All right, bike is done. I swapped to the 47 tooth sprocket, nothing too special there. The only thing that's left is for me to test ride it, and I'm also gonna get it up to temperature and make sure that the fan override switch is working. But that's basically it. That is a very comprehensive hard enduro, maybe medium enduro build. This rider is not a pro, he's just an average everyday dirt bike rider, and he wanted his bike to be set up so that it would be reliable and fun to ride in slower technical terrain. Of course, there are some things that I would change if it was my personal bike, but that's just preference. Something like the tire, I would get rid of the stock AT81. I also put swing arm guards on my bike. I got over 100 hours on mine and they're starting to fall apart. In my opinion, money well spent. But other than that, this bike is pretty close to what I would build for myself and what I have built for myself. If you guys think that there's something that I should have added or that the customer should add in the future, comment down below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Also, if you're interested in joining my TrueTech community, I'll include a link in the description. There's a suspension course that's live on there, a tire changing course, all highly applicable. I'm going to be doing an electrical course in the near future. Now I'm going to go test ride this bike. Thanks a lot for watching.